I worked through a very difficult trauma of my ego. My childhood personality was so deeply rooted in me. I did about 3 years of very intense healing. Um, just on my entire mind was dissolving. So not just my ego, but like all voices in my mind, all personalities, like everything was just dissolving. And then I came home, and a few months after I came home, I actually contracted COVID. And I had healed, done so much healing, but when I actually had COVID, I guess my nervous system, because I was severely ill for 2 months, like just severely ill for 2 months. And so what happened was my nervous system, I think, during the time, really became triggered. And at the end of 2 months, I was feeling better, and I was coming out of it, but still not fully recovered. So that third month, what I was experiencing is a lot of like a trauma voice that had developed here. And it was like its own trauma personality. It was like a trauma identity. And I remember like when I would lift something up, because I had become so like weak during COVID, I couldn't even lift up like my water bottle. And I'll show it to you. This is my water bottle. And I never have any issues like, picking it up. It's like 1 liter or something. I couldn't lift this. I couldn't lift it. I couldn't fill it up all the way and lift it. So sometimes I would like lift it halfway, like, fill it up if I could get out of bed, right? Fill it up halfway and then carry it back, because I couldn't. It was just too heavy, full, filled all the way. So this trauma identity was like, it had developed to such an extent that it was an overlay onto every single moment. It had developed this kind of hypervigilance. And so like, as I started getting better and I realized like, oh, okay, like I'm getting a little bit stronger. I started like when I would lift the filled water bottle now, there was still a voice that said, oh, I can do it. It was like, and I would notice this like, and this is just one example, one moment in my day that I remember, but it was doing this all the time. And then let's say the next day after that, again, I would go and fill up my water bottle like I do every day, right? It's my like routine, right? And when I would pick it up off the counter, right? It was filled, right? Filled all the way now, like it's normal heavy weight, right? I would pick it off the counter. That voice would say like, if there was fear or doubt, right? Sometimes it would play like it would say like, oh, I don't know if I could do it, or I can't do it, right? Like, before I even grab it, it would say like, I can't do it. It would either say like, I can't do it, or I don't know if I could do it, or I can do it, right? And all three of these voices, all three of these statements are still rooted in fear. And if you can understand that, like, you have tremendous power. Like you've won if you can understand that. Because all three of these voices, even the one that says I can do it, right? If you feel that energetically, it's still fear. And so my mind was doing that. Like this identity was like literally overlaying onto everything. Like if I had to get out of bed, maybe it would say something like, oh, like I have to pee, right? And it would say it in this context, not in like, when you're normally like just doing something and you're not severely ill, right? Just normal, whatever, and you're like, oh, I gotta pee, right? Like it's like something like a thought that occurs to you. But the way in which it was doing this now was like a sort of like, it was doing it from such like a fear and like a monitoring state. Like it's like doing it such out of fear, as in it's trying to help me, but it's not really. It's actually its existence, the existence of itself is actually the thing that's not helping me, because it itself is the trauma. And so but there's some kind of energy of fear that literally like, it infiltrates our body, and it infiltrated my body because I guess I'd never been physically ill before like this. And so this sort of trauma identity developed, and it was like overlaying every moment. And I remember like when it would do things like this, like, like, because I couldn't walk when I had COVID, right? So when I was coming out of it and I started like, 2 months later, started trying to take like a walk, I would walk for many hours before that. 2 months later now, I'm like starting to walk again. I would literally walk down the block and this identity would kick in again, and it would start panicking. And sometimes I would be like, oh my gosh, like I just come back, or I would, try my best, because now I'm like halfway around the block and I gotta walk again, but my identity is like pulling me back. And And it literally, like when it starts to panic, it's now causing those same feelings of unwellness, right? So it's making me feel ill again in my body. And that's what was so dangerous about this kind of trauma identity, because it was literally pulling me back into physically feeling unwell. And so when I started to see this, I realized, oh my gosh, like this thing, we have to work on it. This thing was the most, out of everything in my life, even like my people pleasing identity, right? Nothing was so severe as, nothing was more urgent for me to see clearly and be vigilant about, right? As in, like, be aware about. Nothing was more urgent for me than this trauma identity that developed when I was ill. Because it would have thoughts like, oh, I'm going to pass out, because that was like one of the symptoms I had when I had COVID. But it was still saying this like when I was getting better. And I remember just thinking, oh my gosh, like when it would say this, right, because there's like an energy of fear in the body, right? What happens is, like, this belief is somehow, like, this statement is believed in somewhere in our body, like we're believing in it, and you can't quite pin like where that's happening, but it's playing here, and there's like something that's believing in it, and it's like caught in that delusion, right? And so when it is believed in, of course, right, like it's going to create like that whole, it's going to simulate that experience again, right? So my body's going to feel unwell, and I'm going to feel like passing out. And it happened a few times. It happened several times as I was getting better. And, a few times I was home alone, and thank God, I called my partner. Like, he was, tremendously there for me, like, when I was ill, even from like a different state. Like, just like when I would call, he would pick up the phone, and it would be like, these moments where, like, literally, like, just having him would save my life. Like, it was just so incredible. But this trauma identity would come back again, right? And I was home alone, even though like he was on the phone, right? I knew, like, I knew that, I had to work through it. And actually it would happen where, it started happening in that third month. It would happen like, maybe once a week or twice a week or every few days maybe, right? This, oh, I'm going to pass out, right? And again, simulating like all like the feelings in the body, like the physical, like feeling, like the physical symptoms in the body. And I'm like, after, I think, like, in the end of that third month, or like near the middle to the end, the third week or something, I remember it happened, and I was like, all right, I was like, I'm here, because like something in you grows stronger, right? So even if this thought like loop is playing, right, I'm gonna pass out, or like, whatever it is, and even if there is something that believes in it, right, because it's playing because there is a part of you that believes in it, right? That's the whole reason the thought is playing. There's something in you that identifies with it, right? But your power, like, to see it becomes greater and greater and greater, right? And so you become like that, like you start taking up, the conscious you takes up more space now in your body, in your mind, right? Like you're here more, and you get to see that thing more, right? So although it was still difficult for me in the third week, I just remember being like, all right, we got this. I'm like holding the railing, and I'm like making my way out to the backyard, right? And I'm like, because the fresh air in the backyard would always help me, right? So I'm like climbing, I'm like, all right, we can do this. And my mom had just like left the house, like literally like an hour or like a half hour before that. And so I remember, like, I was calling my partner, and I was like, all right, we could do this. We got this. I was like, I'm ready. I got this. And so, I think that was like the worst part of my, trauma identity, when it would have like these, like, all of a sudden it would come out of nowhere and just be like, oh, I'm going to pass out. And I'll be like, oh my gosh, like, all right, okay, I'm going for this ride again now. And, it would take, sometimes it would take a few hours for like this sort of like nervous system, like, and these symptoms to like come down again. But when I had COVID, like, this was like a symptom of mine. It would take like sometimes 6 hours to come back down from, like, it was sort of like a sensation of like chills in the body, and the chills were like accompanied by like a sensation that like a disorientation in the brain. Like, it was like almost like I couldn't feel my upper body, like wasn't aware of my upper body. And so it was tremendously difficult, like 6 hours. Like, it was a symptom that I had never experienced before, and I have difficulty even explaining it now. It was like the bottom half of my legs, I think, felt cold and would shiver or something, but the top half of my body felt hot. And then there was like a sensation, like that was like, it wasn't painful, but it was like running. It was definitely a sensation though. It was like I could feel it in my head. It was like I could almost feel it, like trace it, like, you know, its movement. And it was kind of like a disorienting kind of thing. And this would last for like 6 hours. This was the worst part of my COVID, hands down. And yeah, I think the second worst part was the extreme fatigue. Like I literally could not get out of bed, and it was like that for like 2 months. It was so severe. And this was in like 2025. I must have contracted like a version of it that was really, I don't know what version it was. I didn't receive any kind of vaccination. I've never gotten any kind of COVID vaccination. But I also have never been sick. I hadn't been sick for like maybe like 12, 15 years, you know, before COVID. Not even like a cold. Like there were like maybe a handful of times in that time, like in that decade plus, where like even like I would get like maybe like a cold, like symptoms of a cold, but like it would start to bud, but then like 3 hours later it would be gone. Like those symptoms, nothing ever really developed. And so to go from just being really, really healthy, and also was physically active, also ate very, very well, like physically active, like an athlete's endurance, and athlete's heart rate probably is a resting heart rate as well, probably. So just being really, really healthy, and not having any like really medical issues. Although I did have like Hashimoto's thyroiditis that was diagnosed when I was 15, but I feel like it's been in remission for like many, many years now. And maybe at least like a good 3-4 years before the COVID hit, because that's when I really started becoming like strict with my diet. And the 3-4 years before I had COVID, I felt like I was in the best health of my life, and I was in optimal health, and peak physical health. I mean, I was going to the gym every day for 3 hours. I was powerlifting. I was, doing like, Zumba classes, and just very like, I have a lot of cardio stamina. I could do 2 Zumba classes straight, and I could run like, several miles, straight, many miles, maybe 10 miles straight, right? So I was in peak physical health, but I also, I was in peak mental health too, because I'd just done a bunch of trauma healing, right? So I was the strongest mentally that I'd ever been too. You do trauma healing when you're at like literally your strongest state, right? That's when you can heal. And having just done all of this healing, like I had now like a more space, more peace, more all this stuff, and then COVID hit me, and literally like the rug underneath me. It was almost like I had gone from peak physical, peak mental, to like negative in both, like so negative. And it took me a long time to really to alchemize that, because it was so tremendously difficult. And I just even when I was coming out of it, like I hadn't fully like acknowledged the blessing of it. And because when I had it, it was just about survival. I wasn't thinking like, oh, like, this is bad or this is good, right? When I had it, it was like literally just every moment, my mind was completely shut off, and every moment was just about like, okay, just getting through that moment. So there wasn't really any thinking. There wasn't really any thought. And this was like for 2 months, like I was just in survival mode like this, right? Like literally just one moment at a time, just getting through that moment. That's it. So when that 3rd month came around, I was experiencing all this trauma. It was a lot. It was definitely a lot to work through. And I remember doing like, there was one night where I just did like energetic work. I just lay in the bed, and again, just like felt like concentrated like efforts to like feel the energy in my body and release it. And I don't know if I would recommend this, because it is very concentrated and it is a lot for the body to handle. But I ended up doing it, because that's when I really realized, oh my gosh, this thing is like it's a behemoth, like this trauma identity, like it's gonna make me ill again, right? So I like literally lay with it one night, and I did like this very intense like session of just like 3 hours, just just really like concentrating on the energy in the body and doing my best to release it. Trauma is a very difficult thing, and I don't know if it ends, right? Like today, there was a chess club here at the library, and I walked into the meeting because I had seen it several times. I've been home for like the last year. And, when I first came home to this library that I grew up in, I came after so many years of being away from my hometown. And so I was like, like getting all the flyers and the brochures that they have with all the schedules and events on it. And I saw Chess Club, and I right away I thought to myself, oh my gosh, that, I played chess when I was younger. I was like, that would be so cool to go. So I had it on my calendar. Like I kept getting notifications, but I didn't end up coming to the library. So I've been coming to the library to record a lot in the last 2 weeks or so. I've been recording all these videos. And today I walk in and I see the sign for the chess club, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go. So I ended up going, but it was in a closed off room, right? And it was just like maybe like 20 people in this small room. And the library, you can tell, is more spaced out, right? It's more spacious, but it was like in a small room in the basement. And so I ended up staying. But as I was there, right, there was a thought, sort of like the identity arose again, that trauma identity, right? Because now it's fearful of getting sick. So it was worried about the closed room. It was worried about the people there and getting sick from them. It was worried about I don't know how long it was going to be there, right? Should I leave now, stuff like that. And so I ended up staying the entire duration and even longer, right? And I think certain things help, like focusing our mind on an activity, right? So like when I was actually playing chess and I was thinking about the chess, right, my mind kind of it was taken off of that. And so that can be, of course, very helpful for as one of the ways that we come out of trauma. But sometimes, and very often, right, trauma is so significant that the root of it really needs to be dealt with. And that involves that can involve feeling the pain, and we can say, right, over time the nervous system gradually it settles, right? It can, right? And so maybe there are people who they'll focus themselves on work or a different activity, right? And over time, right, and maybe there still are episodes in between there, right, because they're not working all the time. So maybe their trauma just that identity arises in an unexpected moment, right? It always does, right, and it just hits them all of a sudden out of nowhere, right? And so I think if you don't want that to happen, right, it to just come on full force, and you end up having a panic attack or something like that, right? If you do this work, right, it can help you from experiencing very intense moments where the trauma just comes back full throttle, And so I think that could be helpful, and I don't see why not, right? You can work and focus your attention on something, an activity, or on work, and then also make time for this healing, right? We can make time for anything. Literally, we can make time for anything, and this is really something it will change your life when you alchemize it, when you heal, when you take that pain, right, that fear, and you heal it enough to a point where you neutralize it, right? But then something happens, right? It's almost like the healing starts to it starts to take you over, right? So now the process is kind of you're now the healing is taking over you. And there's something really profound that happens after you reach neutrality, is that somewhere along the way, and this can even happen when there's still a little bit more, there's still fear in the body, right? So there's still trauma or whatever, and maybe it hasn't fully reached a state of neutrality, but there's something really profound that happens. The more and more healing you do, that pain, that fear actually becomes your superpower. And I've experienced this with my people-pleasing identity, right? So I'm actually really glad that I'm speaking about this now, because I just now realized that this fear, right, that I was experiencing, right, around being around people or being in closed rooms, right, this fear of being sick, it can actually become my superpower, and it very well, will be, right? It's just on its way there, because I've already experienced that with my people-pleasing ego. So, I'm really glad that I talked about this. It's quite interesting, right? This fear literally plays here until we clarify it, right? So a very good way to do that sometimes is just to wake up and be oh, like, oh, I'm not gonna get sick right now. Like, this is not how I'm gonna get sick. Sometimes like you feel, because you realize, oh, it's just fear. Like, do I have a really good reason to be fearful? Like, no, I don't. Like, the way that I actually caught COVID was I was sitting in the car with somebody, and I think this is how I caught it. And we were just in a parked car. She was dropping me off to my house. I think she had turned the engine off. Maybe it was really cold, outside, so the windows were closed, right? Maybe no ventilation in the car. And I was telling her my life story. So the ride home from the gym, where we were working out together, and then she dropped me home, was like literally just 5 minutes. But I ended up staying in the car for her for like an extra like 20 minutes at least, just telling her about like my life. And it was a really wonderful conversation, but I ended up, I think that's where I, contracted COVID. It was from that conversation in the car. And so maybe like not being in that specific situation, right? It's got to be something that's like sensible, right? It's got to make sense, right? And I was just thinking to myself when I was in the basement just now, and that like in the chess club, I was just thinking to myself, okay, like it's I'm not gonna get sick this way, right? And sometimes you can like sort of like use this kind of clarity to snap out of your ego's fear, right? Because it just has like it's a delusional story that it's playing. Like it believes it believes it for certain, right? It has a belief that it's going to get sick. And so just clarifying that, like, no, like just like wake up and just be like, look at things and examine things and be like, no, actually that's not what's gonna happen, right? I'm not gonna get sick, right? And I've been going to the gym the last few days after, like, I literally returned to the gym after like 6 months, since my COVID, because it took a minute for me to recover. And so even going back to the gym, I was okay for like the first few days. I hadn't really thought about it. And then just yesterday, I met somebody else who told me like she got COVID from that gym too. And though I didn't actually get it from the gym, I got it from my friend who like went to the same gym with me and then drove me home, right? And I got it in the car probably. I think so anyway. Although I had like, done a Zumba class with her and hugged her and stuff. So it's hard to say, right? But I really think it was like that, just face to face. Like you're literally like a few feet away from somebody, talking to them like for like 20 minutes. I think that's very well the way that I got it. But I met somebody else at the gym yesterday, and she was telling me that she also got COVID at the gym, from the gym. And she was like, yeah, she was like, now I'm scared. And although I didn't really feel scared when she told me, I was like, yeah, just talking to her or whatever. But when I came home, like later, I see like, oh, that programming, that trauma identity, like that fear has arisen again. And I didn't even feel scared when she was talking to me and telling me that she felt scared to like be at the gym now. I didn't even feel scared. And so it's so interesting how like this thing plays. It's almost like it just comes up whenever it comes up, right? It's like it just has a play, like the fear. Maybe there's a greater purpose in all of this, right? Because you clearly can't, like, there almost isn't a clear connection to why this thing came up, other than the fact that like, okay, it's just an experience that I had, like where somebody talked to me and told me about their fear, and now this thing like starts playing, even though like I didn't feel scared when they told me. It's like it almost has like a purpose, right? It's almost like it's coming up again, and it's like okay, like I need to reaffirm again. But do you see what I mean? Like there's a sort of intention behind the fear, maybe, even though I don't get to control it, right? It's like coming up again, and I'm like, wow, like that's so fascinating. Like I didn't even feel scared earlier, but it's coming up again. So there's like an energy in the body that really needs to be dealt with. It needs to be sat with. Like this energy needs to be healed. And so yeah, that was literally yesterday. And today I came to the library, and I see like I ended up going to the chess club, and again like this fear started. So who knows what that means? Maybe it just needs more sitting. Maybe it's coming back up again to be seen from a different level of consciousness, because I have done I have healed this thing so much, like this particular trauma identity, this fear of being sick and being ill. I have healed it so much. So maybe it is coming up, because that's what happens with healing, right? The same thing comes up, but then you look at it differently. There's a part of me just now, it's an energy I could tell, right, that was like, oh, okay, that means I have to like I have to go on, the roller coaster ride with this thing for a while, right? Go on the ride with this thing for a while. But even that, right? Even that is a fear in itself. You could tell, and that energy died down like really quickly, right? Even when I was down in the basement, I was like, oh my God, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm actually not afraid of being sick or getting sick. I'm not afraid of getting sick again. I'm not. And it's really important to like clarify that in you. Like, no matter what this identity is, right? No matter, even if it's not like an illness, right? No matter what the fear is here, to be in your conscious presence and then to clarify, like to look clearly, to come from clarity and be like, oh my God, I'm not afraid.